All right, welcome back to Hoop Hierarchy. This is KC coming to you with the second video in this video series ranking all number one overall picks by their careers. So this video is going to be covering players from 1961 to 1970. We're just going to go over the ground rules here real quick on how I'm doing this series. So basically, like I said, I'm going to be looking at players that went number one overall in the NBA draft, going all the way back to the beginning of the NBA, and ranking them by how well they lived up to the hype of being a number one overall pick throughout their NBA career. I'm not really going super deep into all of these guys. I'm basically covering career stats, some notable, interesting things about them maybe, and then ranking them just based off of that. Because, like I said, there's some players here that there isn't a lot to dive deep on. A lot of them kind of had a pretty monotonous career. But some of them did have some interesting things about their career, and so it's definitely a good thing, in my opinion, to cover players that might not get covered all the time, because there's obviously a wide range of outcomes when it comes to the number one overall pick. You could be a generally bad player, or you could be a Hall of Famer. So, but yeah, the tiers are going to be as follows. S is a Hall of Famer, basically. Exceeded expectations. Fantastic pick at number one. A is probably a multiple-time All-Star, at least a very, very good player, and met the hype of being number one. B is an acceptable pick, but a minor letdown compared to maybe some other guys that were picked after him, or just in general, statistics weren't overwhelming. C is a solid-ish player, maybe, but definitely a disappointment for a number one overall. And then F is a bad player. We're getting to the point where there's probably not going to be that many super terrible number one overall picks, but there will definitely be a lot that were just simply kind of solid, but didn't do a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. And so, starting out with the first pick in 1961, Walt Bellamy. So that starts off the list really solidly. Walt Bellamy had a really good NBA career in general. After a great career in Indiana, he got picked number one overall by the Chicago Packers and had a really pretty insane rookie year, and when he averaged 31.6 points per game and 19 rebounds a game. That ended up being the best season of his career, as his numbers kind of dwindled over season after that. But a really good player, really great career, definitely a Hall of Famer, deserves that for sure. There wasn't really one other guy in his draft either that was even close to him. So to me, a combination of those factors puts Bellamy pretty solidly in the S tier to start off the list. Next up, we have Bill McGill. So, continuing the pattern of great names from the list last time, Bill the Hill McGill from the University of Utah was a really dominant player in college. Especially in the 1961-1962 season, he averaged 38.8 points a game, so he definitely earned that number one overall pick. He's probably most well known for being the inventor of the jump hook. A little bit of a backstory on that, because I thought this one was kind of fun. So basically, this is what I took off of an article. The jump hook legend was that it was first used by McGill in the summer of 1955 when the college stars and future Hall of Famers Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and Guy Rodgers met up with McGill on a Los Angeles playground for a pickup game. McGill was a freshman at Jefferson High School at the time, and Bill Russell chose to play with McGill, who then made up this shot against a taller and stronger Wilt Chamberlain to try to shoot over him. That shot was, of course, the jump hook. And obviously that's a shot that's used widely today. And so to be the guy that kind of came up with such a widely used shot is pretty impressive. Obviously at that time, Kareem's hook was considered to be the greatest hook, and it probably still is, but no one still uses the sky hook, and everyone still uses the jump hook. So that's something to be considered on how kind of a lasting impact that Bill McGill has left on basketball, even a name being known by basically no one. But yeah, even leaving that kind of mark on basketball, his NBA career didn't particularly stand out. McGill bounced around a lot of, not just teams, but between leagues too. And for some teams, he'd average 14 to 16 points per game. For others, he'd average 2, so he did not have a consistent usage rate on any team in his career. Also, unfortunately for him in his draft, Zelmo Beatty, Chet Walker, and John Havlicek were all drafted after him. All Hall of Famers, making him poor value at the number 1 overall pick. Not an awful player, but definitely did not live up to being number 1 overall for a career. So Bill McGill is going to be C tier. So next up is Art Heyman. So Art Heyman, he had a really kind of a pretty fun college background. So he went to Duke, and as rough as the Duke-North Carolina rivalry is today, it's nothing like it was back then. They were throwing hands on the regular back in the day. One game in particular, they had multiple fights, and so many players got ejected that North Carolina had to finish with 3 players because, like, 5 guys fouled out and 3 others got ejected. That night, Heyman fought a fan because he thought he was threatening him or something. And in the same game, one of the players that got ejected for a hard foul was Art Heyman. He fouled really, really hard. Legendary NBA coach Larry Brown, who played for North Carolina. Brown then swung on him. And then Donnie Walsh, who is a future GM for the Indiana Pacers for a long time, also attacked Heyman, to which they all got suspended for the rest of the season. So, yeah, this kind of gave Heyman the reputation of being a hothead, which he earned. This ended up carrying over to his NBA career as, after a promising rookie season averaging 15.4 points per game, he apparently had such a bad temper and multiple outbursts that gradually caused him to lose playing time. He had a couple more years of success later in his career after moving to the ABA, but for the most part, definitely a disappointment as well to where he was drafted. So C tier for Art Heyman. So next up we have Jim Bad News Barnes. So he became a legend at UTEP, having some really great seasons where they had a real shot at the championship, honestly. There was one year he averaged 29.1 points and 19.2 rebounds, including a game where he scored 51 and had 36 boards. So yeah, again, another player who earned his spot. When he made to the NBA, he had a pretty similar start to a lot of these picks around this time. You know, a really promising rookie year, averaging 15.5 and 9.7, but then fell off pretty soon after that. He didn't have anything crazy as far as an NBA career, but it was pretty long. After his career, he managed to make a barbecue sauce, market it really well, and sell over 3 million cases over 24 years in the D.C. area is kind of where he was based out of. So, you know, quite the success after his basketball career, but unfortunately for his NBA career, not quite as much of a success. So he is going to be C tier. Think this is him. I'm trying, like I said in the last video, it's kind of hard for me to remember who is who when it comes to these old players because their faces aren't immediately recognizable to me. Next up we have Fred Hetzel. So Hetzel follows a similar pattern to a lot of the guys before him, kind of what Barnes did. But of course, Hetzel did not have the booming barbecue business to spice up the story. He was a little bit less interesting. He put up crazy numbers at a smaller school, in his case, Davidson, and then move on to have like 2 relatively productive NBA seasons, but then kind of fell into a role player spot. Wasn't a particularly great player, not a terrible one either. What was terrible is that Rick Barry went directly after him in the draft. Fortunately for the team that took Hetzel, they also had the second pick. So they made up for that underwhelming first overall selection with Rick Barry. But Hetzel was never quite the player that Barry was. He is going to go C tier as well. A lot of C tiers here. Kind of a lot of average to not quite that great careers for players at this time. Cazzie Russell is up next. So Cazzie Russell was actually a pretty decent player for a pretty long period of time. He averaged 30 a game in his last season at Michigan. He then went on to be taken number 1 overall by the Knicks and won himself a championship in 1969. Also made an All-Star game with the Warriors in 1971-72. He had a 10-year-long career where he pretty consistently scored in the mid-teens. Wasn't quite as good as a couple of guys selected after him, namely Dave Bing and Lou Hudson. But the Knicks certainly could have done much worse. Cazzie Russell was a pretty decent player. For that reason, I'm going to be putting him in B tier. Next up is Jimmy Walker. So, Jimmy Walker, the father of Jalen Rose, for those who may not know, also kind of a fun fact and aside, the name Jalen was virtually invented by Jalen Rose's mother. She combined the names of James for Jimmy Walker here, and also Jalen's uncle Leonard. So J. Lynn. Now this name's obviously incredibly popular now. It's kind of crazy to look back and see that basically one of the more popular names these days was invented by basically Jalen Rose, and part of it did come from Jimmy Walker. But, Jalen Rose, great player, but Jimmy actually had a pretty long, successful career in his own right. Walker had a great career at Providence. While he was at college, they compared him to Oscar Robertson. He averaged 25.2, 6.3 boards, and 5.3 assists over his college career. In the NBA, he never quite reached that potential that he was compared to, as he gained some weight in the league and lost some quickness, which was kind of what he did. That was kind of his bread and butter. He still had a few seasons averaging around 20 a game. He made 2 All-Star games. In general, he wasn't bad, but he also was drafted in the NFL for no reason. Just some team decided to take him just because of his athletic ability. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, when it comes to basketball, he didn't live up to that hype. B tier for Jimmy Walker. Next up, we've got 3 pretty great players. So, Elvin Hayes is first. Like I said, Elvin Hayes, a really good player. Named one of the 50 best named as one of the 50 best players of all time in the NBA when they did that 50th anniversary thing. Elvin Hayes had one of the longest, most successful, most underrated NBA careers in general. In college, Hayes participated in what was called the Game of the Century, where he outdueled Kareem to win the game for Houston over UCLA to break a very long winning streak for UCLA. And it was one of the first regular season games that was nationally televised to kind of bring a lot of attention to college basketball. So this was a very important game, and it lived up to the hype. Hayes, after this game and after that season, was named National Player of the Year over Kareem. He went on to average 28.4 and 17.1 as a rookie in the NBA. And while he did slow down, it wasn't by much. He averaged 20 and 10 for over a decade. Elvin Hayes is a legend of the game. He fits right into the S tier. So next up is Lou Alcindor. So Lou was a decent player. But no, really, Kareem AbdulJabbar, formerly known as Lou Alcindor, one of the best high school players of all time, one of the best college players of all time, one of the easiest selections at number 1 there could possibly be in history. The hype on Kareem coming into the league was just astronomically high, which makes it all the more crazy that I can pretty easily say he surpassed the hype. He carried his dominance from the late 60s almost all the way into the early 90s, just how long he played. He spanned eras and was impossible to stop by anyone, and was only recently surpassed as the highest scorer in NBA history by another number 1 overall pick that we will eventually get to in this series. Lou Alcindor, though, comfortably S tier. And then finally, Bob Lanier. So, like I said, 3 Hall of Famers right in a row here. We are ending this with Bob Lanier, another consistent force. He averaged 29.2 and 16 at St. Bonaventure as a senior, which, by the way, how crazy were stat lines back in the day? It seems like all these guys just had insane stat lines when they played in college. He was then drafted by a Detroit team that had a really solid core with him and Dave Bing, but was horribly mismanaged, really. Never really got things going as a team, even with a pretty decent roster. Or at least a decent core. There was pretty constant roster turnover with that Detroit team, and they hired and fired coaches just on a regular basis. He never won a championship, but could have easily been a great piece on a championship roster. Unfortunately, that was never in the cards for him, but that doesn't discount how good of a career he has had. So yeah, S tier for Lanier as well. So we had quite a few S tier in this in this decade. But yeah, so that'll conclude this video. I'm going to get this going for the rest of the decades as well. I'm going to be trying to crank these videos out on a more consistent basis. I've been uploading on Saturdays and Tuesdays, and so that's what I'm going to try to continue to do for this series. So this one should be going out. You guys will be watching this probably Saturday, Sunday, and then the following video will be coming out on Tuesday. But yeah, like I've said in previous videos, I appreciate the support that I've been getting on this channel. It means a lot to me, and I want to keep it going. I really enjoy doing these tier lists. I really enjoy tapping into some of the unknown history of basketball, and I think that this has been a really good series to do that. But, you know, I appreciate all the support. And with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this one.